A Romani woman with a baby sat down next to her on the commuter train and whispered, "Don't go home today." Sarah didn't believe her. But at 3 in the morning, the phone rang. Her neighbor was screaming, "There's trouble with your apartment." Hearing this, the phone slipped from her hands. Sarah Rogers slowly wiped her hands with a damp napkin, surveying the Sunshine Group after a long October day. The small chairs were neatly pushed under the tables, toys arranged on the shelves. On the windowsill, autumn leaves they had collected on a walk with the children were wilting. The wall clock with bright numbers showed 6:30. The working day at Municipal Kindergarten No. 23 had officially ended half an hour ago. "Sarah, are we really going to make a hedgehog out of clay tomorrow?" Tugged at her sleeve 5-year-old Charlie, the last child who hadn't been picked up yet. His button nose was smeared with watercolor paint, and a greasy stain from lunch decorated his sweater. "Absolutely, Charlie." "Will you bring the acorns your mom promised to find in the park?" Sarah crouched down to his level and gently wiped his nose with a tissue. After 8 years of working as a teacher, she had developed the habit of talking to children eye to eye, so they listened better and felt important. "I will." "Mom said there are plenty lying around in the square near our house." Charlie nodded happily, then suddenly frowned. "But why are acorns so smooth? And why do they come out of the tree?" Sarah smiled. These endless childhood whys no longer tired her. On the contrary, they reminded her how important it is to keep curiosity about the world alive. They're oak seeds. New trees grow from them. They're smooth so they can roll easily on the ground and find a place to take root. Charlie's mother peeked in, the young woman in a business suit, clearly in a hurry from work. "Sorry for being late, the traffic was terrible." "Charlie, get ready quickly, your dad is making dinner." Sarah escorted them to the cloakroom, helped the boy dress, and exchanged a few words with the mother about tomorrow's weather and Charlie's latest progress in modeling. A daily ritual, repeated day after day with different children and parents. Sometimes she felt she knew the families of her pupils better than her own neighbors. Returning to the group, Sarah found her colleague Maggie, who was washing the children's cups in the small sink with a focused expression. Maggie had worked here longer, 12 years, and in that time had nurtured hundreds of children. Her gray hair was neatly tied in a bun, and her face bore the familiar expression of fatigue, known to anyone who had devoted their life to working with children. "Maggie, I'm going to change. Today was especially tough. Either the weather is pressing down, or all the kids are on edge," Sarah said, untying her floral apron with teddy bears on it. "Yeah, my legs are killing me too. I won't crawl home tonight." And that Tom was fussy all day. First the paints were wrong, then the porridge was yucky. "Probably coming down with something. He's sniffling," Maggie replied without looking up from the dishes. "Tomorrow his mom will bring him with a runny nose, and half the group will catch it." In the cramped staff room, Sarah took off her blouse and hung it in the metal locker where her spare shoes and apron were already stored. She put on her usual dark blue jeans and a soft mustard-colored wool sweater, a birthday gift from her mother last year. Outside, November was already approaching, the temperature was dropping to 0, and light autumn jackets had to be replaced with warmer ones. She looked at herself in the small mirror hanging on the inside of the locker door. A tired face with dark circles under her brown eyes, slightly tousled medium-length brown hair. 29, a time in life when you want to look better than your hectic work schedule allows. She took her foundation from her makeup bag and quickly concealed the signs of fatigue. "I need to sleep more and watch fewer series at night," she thought, combing her hair. Home awaited her empty and quiet. A one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a standard 9-story building in a residential district, her personal space after divorcing Daryl 3 years ago. Back then it had seemed like life had collapsed, but gradually she had learned to appreciate solitude and silence. No one to wait for after work. No need to think about what to cook for a husband's dinner. She could watch her favorite series and go to bed whenever she wanted. Her plans for the evening were simple and habitual: reheat yesterday's soup she had made over the weekend, brew some chamomile herbal tea, start the next episode of a Korean romance drama. Maybe her mother would call, she always did on Tuesdays, asking about work, health, and personal life. On the last topic, there had been little to say for 2 years. "Sarah, are you almost ready? I'll miss the last bus, and we have to get up early tomorrow." Maggie called from the hallway, rustling through bags of teaching materials. "I'm coming." Sarah quickly grabbed her black shoulder bag, her warm coat, and scarf. The kindergarten corridor was chilly, the heating hadn't been turned on fully yet, to save budget money. Outside, a piercing October wind met her, making her shiver and quicken her pace toward the bus stop. The streetlights were already on, although full darkness was still half an hour away. The air smelled of damp leaves and smoke from chimneys in the private homes beyond the kindergarten. The bus to the train station took about 15 minutes through the residential neighborhoods. Sarah took a seat by a fogged-up window and watched the evening life of her district. Lights flickered on in the windows of apartment blocks. People hurried along the sidewalks after work. Shoppers crowded outside the store for bread and milk. The usual life of a typical residential area, a life she had been part of for many years. Calm music played in her ears, a habit she had formed back in her student days. Instrumental pieces helped her detach from daytime worries and switch from work mode to home relaxation. Today, her phone played something classical. Melodic piano arpeggios were perfect for gazing out the window. The North train station was crowded, as always, at rush hour. Sarah bought a ticket to her station from the machine, $2, a familiar expense. She passed through the turnstiles onto the platform, where the train was already boarding passengers. The carriages were half full of teachers, doctors, shop assistants, all those who worked in the city center but lived in the suburbs. Sarah chose a window seat in the third carriage, placed her bag on the neighboring seat, and took out her phone. The newsfeed showed the usual city updates: road repairs here, a new shopping center opening there. Rain with wet snow was forecast for tomorrow. Nothing interesting or unusual, the steady rhythm of provincial city life continued unabated. The train started moving smoothly, and familiar landscapes floated past the window: an industrial zone with chimneys and warehouses, dacha plots with crooked fences, small groves where most of the leaves had already fallen. 4 stops remained until the station near her home, about 35 minutes of unhurried travel. The carriage carried the usual evening atmosphere of fatigue and anticipation of home. Opposite, an elderly man dozed in a crumpled jacket with an open Arguments and Facts newspaper on his knees. A little further, a young mother in a denim jacket spoke quietly on the phone while rocking a fussy 1-year-old. In the corner, school children discussed math homework, and a red-haired girl read a thick paperback. An ordinary evening train, ordinary fellow passengers with their worries and thoughts, an ordinary ride home after an ordinary workday. Sarah leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes, allowing exhaustion to take over for a few minutes, freeing her from the need to always be alert. At Central Station, the train slowed and stopped with a light screech at the long platform. Sarah lifted her eyes from the phone. Usually, only a few people boarded here, mostly students from the local technical college and workers from the evening shift at the factory. The carriage doors opened with their characteristic hiss, letting in the cool October air. A young woman with an infant in her arms stepped in. At first, Sarah didn't pay her much attention. Just another mother with a baby, these are seen on trains all the time. But something about the stranger made her look closer. The woman was clearly of Romani ethnicity, dark skin, wavy dark hair tied in a careless bun, a bright floral ankle-length skirt, and a black shawl draped over a worn leather jacket. On her feet were old but sturdy boots, clearly not her first season. She looked about 25, no older. In her arms, she held a baby of about 3 or 4 months, wrapped in a light blue knitted blanket. What drew Sarah's attention most were the Romani woman's eyes. Dark, almost black, they had a certain depth and perceptiveness. It seemed as if this woman could see far more than ordinary people. Her gaze swept over the passengers, pausing on each for a moment, as if reading their fates like open books. The Romani woman walked slowly down the carriage, gently rocking the baby, who slept quietly. Other passengers seemed almost invisible to her. The elderly man with his newspaper, the young mother on the phone, the schoolchildren, the girl with the book, they all continued with their own activities, only glancing sideways at the unusual fellow passenger. Sarah felt her heart quicken when she realized the Romani woman was heading straight toward her. The woman stopped beside her seat and looked into her eyes with careful, intense attention. There was no aggression, no begging in that gaze, only a kind of anxious seriousness. "May I sit?" The Romani woman asked quietly, nodding toward the empty seat next to Sarah. Her voice was low, slightly hoarse, with a barely noticeable accent. Sarah nodded, moving her bag off the seat. Her heart was pounding harder than usual. Something about this woman set her on edge, though she couldn't identify exactly what. The Romani woman carefully settled into the seat, holding the baby with one hand while adjusting her shawl with the other. For several minutes they rode in silence. The little one occasionally whimpered in sleep. The woman gently rocked him, humming a soft lullaby in an unknown language. Sarah pretended to look out the window but watched her neighbor out of the corner of her eye. There was something simultaneously soothing and unsettling about her presence. As the train approached the next stop, Zavitskaya, the Romani woman suddenly turned to Sarah and spoke. Her voice became even softer, almost a whisper, so that even the passengers sitting nearby could not hear. "Beautiful girl, kind girl," she began, looking directly into Sarah's eyes. "I see that your soul is pure, that you love children, care for them like a mother. And I see more, trouble is coming to your home today." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She wanted to wave it off, to say she didn't believe in fortune-telling or predictions, but something in the woman's tone made her listen. "Listen carefully," the woman continued, gently rocking the child. "Tonight, do not go near your home. There will be great, terrible trouble. I saw it in dreams, I feel it with my heart. Tomorrow morning it will be fine, the sun will rise, and it will all pass. But today, no. Do not go." The train began slowing for the station. The Romani woman rose, adjusting the blanket around the baby. The child woke and cried softly, but she calmed him, pressing him to her chest. "But how? What trouble? What is going to happen?" Sarah blurted out, feeling her throat dry. The woman was already standing in the aisle, ready to get off. She turned back and looked at Sarah once more with the same intense gaze. "Fire and smoke, destruction. Your home will suffer, and you may not survive if you are there. Go to relatives, to your sister or a friend, spend the night elsewhere. Believe me, I have never seen such dreams before." The doors opened, and the Romani woman quickly stepped onto the platform. Sarah jumped up and pressed against the window, trying to see where the strange prophetess had gone. But the platform was crowded, some people were getting off, some boarding, and in the crowd, the woman disappeared as if she had never been there. The train moved on, and Sarah remained at the window, feeling her hands tremble. Her heart pounded so hard it felt as though all the passengers could hear it. Her head spun from the shock of what had just happened. "Nonsense," she muttered under her breath, returning to her seat. Just some beggar trying to get money, but why didn't she ask for money? No matter how much Sarah tried to convince herself it was all nonsense, something inside resisted rational explanations. The Romani woman's voice had sounded too convincing, too serious. There was not a trace of pretense or calculation, only genuine concern for a stranger. She took out her phone and nervously scrolled through her contacts. Maybe call her sister Amanda? But what could she say? "Hi. A Romani woman on the train scared me. Can I stay at your place tonight?" It sounded ridiculous. Amanda would laugh and rightly say Sarah was too impressionable. Or maybe it really was just a coincidence. The woman saw a tired, lonely woman and decided to frighten her, maybe to get something. But again, she hadn't asked for money, hadn't asked for anything. She gave her warning and disappeared. Familiar landscapes flashed by outside. The station was getting closer. Usually, at this time, Sarah would already be thinking about what to cook for dinner, what movie to watch before bed. Today, all her thoughts were consumed by the words of the stranger. Fire and smoke, destruction. What could it mean? A fire? An explosion? Or just the ramblings of a mad woman? An elderly man across from her snored, dropping his newspaper onto the floor. A young mother was still talking on the phone, discussing plans for tomorrow with someone. School children were getting ready to get off at the next stops. Life continued on as usual, while Sarah sat, feeling fear slowly but surely take hold of her mind. "It's all nonsense," she muttered again. But her voice trembled. "Just a random encounter with an unwell woman. I'll go home, as usual." Yet even as she said these words, Sarah knew she wouldn't be able to simply forget what had happened. The gypsy's warning had lodged in her mind like a splinter, and now every thought of home brought an inexplicable dread. The commuter train rocked steadily over the rail joints, and Sarah sat clutching her phone tightly, trying to organize the chaotic thoughts in her head. The gypsy's words echoed again and again: fire and smoke, destruction. It was silly to believe in predictions, but then why did her heart feel so heavy with anxiety? She had always considered herself a rational, practical person. As a child, of course, she had listened to her grandmother's stories about prophetic dreams and bad omens, but with age, all of that had seemed like relics of the past. Yet now, in the half-empty train car, memories of her grandmother surfaced with unexpected clarity. Her grandmother had died 5 years ago, but Sarah still remembered her words. "Sarah, don't laugh at old beliefs. The world is bigger than it seems. And sometimes higher powers send us signs through the most ordinary people." At 14, those words had seemed like the ramblings of an old woman. Now, the first houses of Dagnaya Station, the penultimate stop before hers, appeared outside the window. 10 minutes of travel remained, and she had to make a decision: go home as usual, or heed the words of a stranger gypsy. Sarah opened her contacts and found her sister Amanda's number. Her older sister lived in the neighboring district with her husband Derek and 14-year-old son Alex. They had always been close, despite the age difference. Amanda was 6 years older. After Sarah's divorce, her sister had helped her through the difficult period, often inviting her over, providing moral support. But how could she explain the sudden request to stay the night? Amanda worked as an accountant at a construction company. A very rational person, used to organizing everything neatly. If Sarah told her the truth about the gypsy, she would definitely laugh and say Sarah had watched too many silly movies. The train began slowing down before Dagnaya Station. A few passengers got up, preparing to get off. Sarah stared at her phone screen, where her sister's name was glowing, unable to bring herself to press the call button. What if the gypsy was right? She thought, and a chill ran down her spine at the thought. What if something really terrible happens, and I ignore the warning? The train moved again, heading toward the last stop. Familiar childhood landscapes flickered past the window. She had grown up here, gone to school, met her first boyfriend. This district had been her home for 29 years. Could something really happen to my apartment today? Sarah recalled the morning rush, running out of the house, late for work, and maybe not checking whether the iron was off. Or had she checked? Her memory betrayed her, remaining silent. And the gas stove? She seemed to have only had sandwiches for breakfast and hadn't turned it on, but she couldn't be completely sure. Maybe it's not about omens, maybe I really did forget to turn something off. Sarah tried to find a rational explanation for her anxiety, but her inner voice insisted, The gypsy wasn't talking about a forgotten iron, but about something much more serious. Finally, Sarah dialed her sister's number. The ringing seemed endlessly long. "Sarah, hi. That's early for a call." Usually after 9, Amanda's familiar voice came through. In the background, the sound of the TV and Alex's voice asking his father something could be heard. "Olia, sorry to bother you. Can I come over for the night?" "I'm scared to be home alone," Sarah said, trying to make her voice sound as natural as possible. "What happened? Are you sick, or is someone bothering you?" Amanda immediately sounded concerned. Her older sister had always known when Sarah was in trouble. "No, it's just a kind of oppressive mood." "Maybe magnetic storms?" "I don't know, I just really want to be with family." Sarah hoped the explanation would sound convincing. "Of course, come over. Derek is just cooking pilaf for everyone, it'll be more than enough. And Alex will be thrilled, he hasn't seen Aunt Sarah in a while." "But are you really okay? Your voice sounds a bit worried." The first houses of the station appeared outside the window. One more minute, and she would have to get off, walk to the bus stop, and head home to her apartment. But something inside her resisted that plan desperately. "Yes, everything's fine, I'm just really tired. I'll catch the bus to you now, I'll be there in an hour." Sarah was surprised at the firmness in her own voice. "Okay. I'll wait. Alex, clear your books off the table, Aunt Sarah is coming." Amanda shouted to someone in the room. The train stopped at the station. Sarah watched the familiar platform through the window, people getting off the cars and heading toward the exit. Among them were her neighbors, Aunt Zara from the 3rd floor, the young couple from the apartment across the hall. They were all going home, to their usual evening routines. The doors opened, but Sarah did not get up. Something held her in the seat, fear, or perhaps a premonition. She closed her eyes and tried to picture her apartment, a small hallway, a room with a sofa and a TV, a tiny kitchen with potted flowers on the windowsill. "Maybe I should just go, check that everything's fine." The thought flickered in her mind. But then she remembered the gypsy's eyes, serious, full of worry. "Don't go near your home today." The doors closed, and the train slowly moved on toward the final station. Sarah leaned back in her seat and took a deep breath. The decision was made. Tonight she would stay at her sister's, and tomorrow morning, in the daylight, she would return home and make sure all her fears were unfounded. But why, then, did her chest still feel tight? Why did her hands keep trembling, her heart racing? She took a bottle of water from her bag and took a few sips. She needed to calm down, to pull herself together. In half an hour, she would be at her sister's, in a warm home, surrounded by family. There, she could forget the strange encounter on the train and the prediction that would probably never come true. But she couldn't forget. The image of the gypsy with a child in her arms stood before her eyes, and her words echoed in Sarah's ears: fire and smoke, destruction. What if it's not just empty words? What if tomorrow morning brings a terrible discovery? "Enough," Sarah said aloud, making the elderly man with the newspaper turn around. "It's just a coincidence. Tomorrow I'll laugh at my own fears." Yet a worm of doubt had already settled inside her, gnawing and refusing to let her rest. Outside, the lights of her home district flickered in the darkness, the same district she was leaving for the first time in her life out of fear of the unknown. The bus slowly wound its way through the evening streets where Amanda lived with her family. Sarah sat by the window, watching familiar cityscapes under the glow of streetlights. The rain began to drizzle lightly, droplets sliding down the glass, blurring the lights of shop windows and billboards. The closer she got to her sister's home, the more absurd her sudden decision seemed. What will I tell Derek? That a gypsy on the train scared me? Sarah thought, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Derek was practical, an engineer by training, accustomed to logical explanations. He would surely think she had some mental problem. The stop was 3 blocks from her sister's home. Sarah got off the bus and quickly walked along familiar paths between the 5-story buildings. The district had been built in the 1980s, and it still retained a cozy atmosphere, wide courtyards with playgrounds, old trees between the buildings that gave the area its name. At entrance number 4, she stopped, adjusted her hair, and took a deep breath. Lights were already on in her sister's apartment on the 3rd floor. Sarah climbed the staircase, smelling the fresh paint. Recent renovations had been done in the building. Amanda opened the door even before Sarah could ring. Her older sister looked, as always, neat and homely, dark blue jeans, a soft cream-colored cardigan, hair tied in a casual bun. Her face bore a slight expression of worry, always appearing when it concerned her younger sister. Sarah, finally. I was starting to get worried, Amanda said. She hugged her sister tightly, and Sarah smelled the familiar scent of her favorite perfume and laundry detergent. Come in quickly, it's nasty and damp outside. The hallway smelled of pilaf and homey warmth. From the kitchen came the soft sounds of music and a man's voice, Derek talking to his son. Sarah took off her shoes, hung her coat on the rack, and only then felt the tension slowly release from her shoulders. Aunt Sarah. Alex ran out of the room, a tall teenager with a mop of dark hair and his father's clear gray eyes. Over the past 6 months, he had grown noticeably and was now almost as tall as his aunt. And Dad told me about a new computer game. Want to hear about it? Alex, at least let your aunt come inside first, Amanda laughed, though her voice carried a note of maternal pride. Sarah, go to the kitchen. Derek is working his magic on the pilaf, and I'll put the tea on. The kitchen was bright and cozy. Derek stood by the stove, stirring something aromatic in a large pot. A man of average height, with a neat beard and kind brown eyes, he always greeted Sarah as if she were his own daughter. After her divorce, Derek had been the one to repeatedly say that her ex-husband was a complete idiot who failed to appreciate such a wife. Oh, our dear guest, he said, turning around and drying his hands with a kitchen towel. How's the teaching front? The kids aren't too much trouble? Everything's as usual. Thank you for letting me come so late, Sarah replied, sitting down at the table where plates and cutlery were already laid out. The table was set with obvious care, a beautiful tablecloth, napkins, even small glass cups for compote. What do you mean late? You're always a welcome guest here. Look, Amanda's been running around for half an hour, making sure everything's ready. Derek winked at his wife, who was carrying a tray with cups and a teapot. I wasn't running around. I just wanted Sarah to feel at home, Amanda protested, though her smile revealed her satisfaction. The sisters hadn't seen each other for a while. The last time had been about 2 months ago, at their mother's birthday. Alex had dragged a tablet from his room and sat down next to his aunt, ready to show her the new game. First, we eat, then entertainment. And put the tablet away from the table, Amanda said firmly. The pilaf was excellent, fluffy rice with juicy meat, carrots, and spices. Derek cooked it according to his Uzbek grandmother's recipe and was always proud of the result. Fresh tomatoes, herbs, and homemade apple compote were served alongside. How's work going? Amanda asked, giving her sister a second helping. The kids aren't driving you crazy? No, the children are good. The one boy, Tom, has become very fussy. Probably sick, runny nose and constant crying, Sarah replied. She was grateful for the ordinary conversation, which helped her forget her anxious thoughts. In my class, half are sick too, Alex added. Leon hasn't been to school for a week, says he has a high temperature. Autumn, what can you do? Everyone's immunity is weak after summer, Derek noted, pouring more compote. And how about your personal life, Sarah? Anyone suitable showing up? Amanda immediately nudged her husband in the side. Derek, don't pry. Oh, it's fine, everything's okay, Sarah smiled. Just haven't met the right person yet. After Daryl, I've been more cautious about relationships. Smart move, Amanda nodded. Better to be alone than with the wrong man. Remember what Grandma used to say, haste makes fools of us. After dinner, everyone moved to the living room. Alex turned on the TV, which was showing a comedy with popular actors. Amanda brought a bowl of cookies and settled into her favorite chair with knitting in hand. She was making Alex a new scarf for winter. Remember how we used to sit at Grandma's in the evenings? Amanda said, not looking up from her stitches. She'd tell us stories, and we'd listen while nibbling cookies. I remember, Sarah made herself comfortable on the couch, propping a soft pillow behind her back. Especially the stories about house spirits and forest spirits. I was scared to walk alone in the dark afterward. And she always said there are different omens and signs you shouldn't ignore, Amanda continued. Remember how she talked about prophetic dreams and premonitions? Sarah felt her heart start to race. Could her sister have guessed the real reason she had come? Grandma was a very wise woman, she answered cautiously. Though not everything she believed in has a scientific explanation. You know, sometimes I think science can't explain everything, Derek said unexpectedly, without taking his eyes off the TV. Recently at work, a colleague said he dreamed of his deceased grandfather warning him about car trouble. And the next day, the brakes really failed. Dad, you're an engineer. How can you believe in something like that? Alex asked in surprise. Why not? The world is much more complicated than it seems. Maybe there are forces we simply can't understand yet, Derek shrugged. The conversation gradually shifted to other topics, weekend plans, news from Mom, Alex's school matters. Sarah listened, occasionally chiming in, feeling the anxiety slowly ebb away in the warmth of this family atmosphere. Around 11, Alex went to bed, wishing everyone good night. Derek also said he had to get up early and went to his bedroom. The sisters stayed in the kitchen alone, just like in the old days when they could talk until morning about everything under the sun. Sarah, are you really okay? Amanda asked while putting the kettle on. You seem kind of anxious today. Sarah paused. Maybe she should tell her sister the truth? Would Amanda understand, or think she was crazy? Just very tired. And loneliness sometimes weighs on me. It's good that you have such a family, she replied evasively. You know, maybe it's time for you to move out of this neighborhood. Find an apartment closer to us. There are lots of good kindergartens here, and the area is quiet. Maybe I really should think about it, Sarah agreed, surprised at how easily she accepted the idea. They sat in the kitchen for a long time, reminiscing about childhood, mutual acquaintances, and planning a joint trip to visit Mom for the New Year holidays. Gradually, Sarah felt that the decision she had made was the right one. Here, in the warmth of the family home, her fears seemed absurd and imaginary. Sarah slept on the sofa bed in the living room, covered with a soft blanket that smelled of fabric conditioner and home comfort. Her sleep was restless, fragmented nightmares of smoke and fire kept appearing. The face of the gypsy woman with piercing dark eyes kept flashing before her eyes. Several times, Sarah woke up from her own racing heartbeat, but hearing Alex's quiet breathing from the other room and the measured breathing of Derek and Amanda in the bedroom, she drifted back into dozing. A sharp phone ring shattered the night's silence like a lightning strike. Sarah jumped on the sofa. Her heart was pounding wildly. The phone screen showed the time, 3:17 a.m. The call was from the neighbor, Aunt Zara from the third floor. Hello, Sarah croaked, still half asleep. Sarah, girl, where are you? Thank God I reached you. Zara's voice trembled with worry and fear. Are you home? No, I'm at my sister's. What happened? Sarah felt an icy chill run down her spine. Your apartment is on fire. The whole building is blazing. The firefighters are here, but it's chaos. The explosion was terrible. If you had been home. The phone slipped from her numb fingers and fell to the floor. Sarah sat on the sofa, unable to move, as the meaning of what she had heard sank in. Explosion. Fire. Her home is burning. She was alive only because she had listened to the warning of a stranger, the gypsy woman. Sarah, what's happening? Amanda ran into the living room, worried, in her robe, awakened by the call. Behind her appeared a sleepy Derek in sweatpants and a t-shirt. My house explosion fire, Sarah managed to say, pointing at the fallen phone, from which the neighbor's anxious voice was still audible. Derek quickly picked up the phone. Hello? Yes, this is Sarah's brother-in-law. What happened? He listened, occasionally asking for clarification, his face growing increasingly serious. Understood. We're coming right now. Thank you for calling. Hanging up, he looked at the pale-faced Sarah. At 2:30, there was a gas explosion in your building. Apartments from the 1st to the 5th floor were affected. The firefighters contained the fire, but the damage is serious. My God, Amanda whispered, hugging her sister's shoulders. Sarah, do you realize you could have died? Sarah remained silent, in shock, trying to process what had happened. Yesterday's encounter with the gypsy woman no longer seemed like the ramblings of a mad woman, but a true miracle. Fire and smoke. Destruction. That's exactly what had happened. Get dressed, let's go see what's happening, Derek said, already pulling on his jeans. Amanda, stay with Alex, and we'll go with Sarah. The drive to her building took half an hour. Derek drove silently, occasionally glancing at Sarah, who sat beside him like a statue. Outside, the empty city streets flashed by as she tried to comprehend the scale of what had happened. When they turned onto her street, Sarah gasped. The familiar 9-story building where she had lived for the past 3 years was unrecognizable. The entire right entrance, where her apartment was on the 3rd floor, was a burnt-out mess of twisted metal, collapsed balconies, and shattered windows. Fire trucks were parked right in the courtyard, unrolling hoses. The red flashing lights illuminated the scene of destruction, giving everything an apocalyptic appearance. My God! Derek whispered, parking the car a little further from the site. It's a good thing you weren't there. Sarah stepped out of the car on trembling legs. A rescue worker in a protective helmet approached them, a young man with a tired face, smeared with soot. Are you residents? He asked. I used to live in apartment 42, Sarah barely whispered. 3rd floor, right entrance. That's the epicenter of the explosion. Apartments from 40 to 45 are completely destroyed. The rescuer looked at her sympathetically. It's fortunate that no one was home during the explosion, or there would have been casualties. What happened? Why the explosion? Derek asked. Preliminary assessment suggests a domestic gas leak. The old pipes probably failed. Gas accumulated, and any spark could have triggered the explosion. Perhaps the refrigerator activated, or some electrical appliance turned on. The exact cause will be determined by an investigation. Sarah approached the building and saw a pile of debris where her kitchen had been yesterday. The refrigerator she had bought on credit last year lay in the courtyard, twisted into a metal knot by the blast. Only charred frames remained of her bedroom window. I need to get some things, she murmured. You can't go in there, the rescuer shook his head. The structures could collapse. Tomorrow, when everything cools down and engineers check safety, maybe some of your belongings can be retrieved. An elderly neighbor, Aunt Zara, approached them, wrapped in an old coat and nightgown. She was crying, wiping her tears with a handkerchief. Sarah, my dear girl, thank God you weren't home. I woke up to a terrible crash, thought it was an earthquake, and then saw fire and smoke through the window. It was horrifying. Zara, what about the other neighbors? Sarah asked. Agnes from 41 was taken to the hospital. She had a heart attack from the fright. And the Smiths from 43 went to their relative's country house yesterday. So they were saved too, the old woman sobbed. Such a tragedy, and the management company? They were told the gas pipes were old, asked to fix them. Sarah stood among the ruins of her former life, feeling strangely detached, as if none of this was happening to her. Photographs of her parents on the bedroom dresser, beloved books, the dress her mother had given her for her birthday, all turned to ashes and charred rubble. Where will I live now? She quietly asked Derek. With us, of course, until you find a new place, he answered without hesitation. Amanda always said you should live closer to us anyway. By morning, it became clear that very little of her possessions could be saved. Firefighters had removed some items from apartments that suffered less damage. Sarah only managed to salvage documents from the hallway, which had been stored in a metal box, and a few photographs miraculously surviving under the pile of books. When they returned to Amanda's, it was already daylight. Alex was getting ready for school but immediately understood something terrible had happened when he saw his tearful aunt. "Aunt Sarah will live with us now?" he asked their parents. "Yes, for some time," Amanda nodded, hugging her sister until she could find a new apartment. Sarah sat in the kitchen with a cup of hot tea, unable to believe the reality of what had happened. Just yesterday morning, she had lived an ordinary, measured life, and now she was without a home, without belongings, without her familiar world. And if it hadn't been for the warning from the stranger, the gypsy woman, she would have died in her sleep, never even realizing what was happening. "Who do you think that woman on the train was?" she quietly asked Amanda when they were alone. "Maybe a guardian angel?" Her sister replied softly. "Or just someone with a special gift. The main thing is that you're alive and well." The sun was rising on a new day outside, but for Sarah, the world would never be the same. She had to start her life over, yet she was infinitely grateful to fate for giving her this chance. In the first days after the explosion, Sarah seemed to be in a state of shock. She mechanically carried out necessary tasks, calling the insurance company, going to investigators, giving testimony. But all of this felt unreal, as if it were happening to someone else. Amanda took a few days off to help her sister with paperwork and finding temporary housing. Their first visit to the site of the explosion happened 3 days later, when engineers declared the structures relatively safe for brief entry. Sarah put on Amanda's old jeans and rubber boots, grabbed a flashlight, and went with a representative from the management company to search for any surviving belongings. Almost nothing remained of her apartment. The explosion had occurred right in her kitchen. That was where the oldest gas pipe was, the one the management company had promised to replace for the second year running. The refrigerator, which had turned on normally around 3 in the morning, sparked, triggering the detonation of accumulated gas. "You see, the pipe was here," the representative, a middle-aged man in a crumpled suit who clearly understood the serious trouble the company faced, pointed out. The metal was old. By regulations, it should have been replaced last year. Sarah silently nodded, examining the charred remains of her furniture. The washing machine had been twisted into a piece of metal. The sofa she loved to read on in the evenings was completely burned. Only in the far corner of the bedroom, under a pile of books and plaster, did they find a small jewelry box, a gift from her grandmother for her 18th birthday. "That's it?" she asked, holding the only surviving item. "Unfortunately, yes," the representative replied. The burning temperature was extremely high. "But don't worry, insurance will cover everything, and the company is ready to pay compensation for moral damages." The following weeks were spent in endless trips to offices and agencies. Investigator Frank Butler, a pre-retirement man with kind eyes, patiently explained all the nuances of the case to Sarah. "The examination confirmed our version," he said, flipping through a thick folder of documents. The gas pipe had multiple microcracks, causing leaks. The gas concentration in the apartment reached a critical level, and the slightest spark caused the explosion. But why didn't I notice anything in the morning? Gas should have smelled, Sarah asked. The leak had been slow over several days, the investigator explained. Also, your apartment is a corner unit, well ventilated. During the day, the gas dissipated, and overnight it accumulated again. A fatal combination of circumstances. The management company, Comfort Service, found itself in a difficult position. Director Carl Butler, a heavy-set man with a receding hairline, nervously fiddled with a pen during negotiations with Sarah and her representative. "Of course, we are ready to take full responsibility," he repeated. "The pipes did need replacement, but we didn't have sufficient funding from the property owners. Residents refused to pay extra for unscheduled work. The lawyer Amanda recommended, a woman of about 50 with a steely grip and sharp mind, didn't let Carl off the hook. Carl, the safety of gas equipment is your direct responsibility, not a matter of residents' wishes. My client could have died because of your negligence." Negotiations dragged on for a month. The lawyer tried to minimize compensation, citing insurance and force majeure. But the investigation was clear. The cause of the explosion was precisely the worn-out gas pipes, for which the management company was responsible. Meanwhile, Sarah dealt with insurance paperwork. Initially, the insurance company, Reliable Home, tried to deny the claim, citing gross violations of gas equipment usage rules. What violations? Sarah protested at a meeting with the insurance representative. "You didn't use gas at all. You have an electric stove, but the gas water heater was working," replied the representative, a young man in an expensive suit. "You used it improperly. The heater had worked properly for 3 years. Its last inspection had been 6 months ago, with no remarks." In the end, after involving independent experts and the lawyer, the insurance company agreed to pay the full sum, $80,000. This covered the value of the lost property, though, of course, it couldn't replace items with sentimental value. As a result of the lawsuit, the management company was ordered to pay Sarah $40,000 in compensation for moral damages and lost opportunities. Additionally, the prosecutor's office initiated a criminal case against the management for providing services that did not meet safety requirements. With nearly $150,000 in hand, Sarah began looking for a new home. Amanda persistently suggested considering apartments in their neighborhood. "Look, the air quality is better here, it's not far from the city center, and there are lots of kindergartens," her sister urged, showing her an online listing. "And most importantly, we'll be nearby." The first weeks of searching were unsuccessful. The apartments were either too expensive, in poor condition, or located in inconvenient areas. Sarah was picky. After the nightmare she had endured, she wanted to find a truly safe and cozy place to live. A suitable option appeared through realtor Monica Kennedy, an energetic middle-aged woman who specialized in selling apartments in new buildings. A 2-room apartment on the second floor of a brick building constructed in 2018 was located just a 10-minute walk from Amanda's house. "Look at this great layout," the realtor said, opening the door to a spacious living room. Open-plan kitchen, separate bedroom, large balcony, and most importantly, everything is new with modern utilities. Sarah really liked the apartment. Bright rooms with large windows, quality renovations, a reliable gas water heater, the latest models with multiple safety systems. The price, $130,000, fit within her budget. "Can I see the documents for the gas equipment?" Sarah asked. The realtor raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Of course, but that's a bit of an unusual request. Usually, buyers are interested in the wiring or plumbing condition. I have reasons to be especially careful about gas," Sarah explained briefly. A week later, the deal was closed. Sarah became the owner of a new apartment in a quiet neighborhood near her sister. At the same time, she applied for a transfer to kindergarten number 47, which was a 5-minute walk from her new home. The head of the kindergarten, Lily, a woman with extensive experience and a kind heart, willingly agreed to accept the new teacher. "We just had a vacancy open in the senior group," she said during the interview. Kathleen went on maternity leave. "The kids are good, the parents are reasonable. I think you'll like it. The new group, Rainbow, truly turned out to be wonderful, 22 children aged 56, preparing for school." Sarah quickly found an approach to each child, and her experience working with children helped her integrate smoothly into the team. "Sarah, why did you transfer to us?" one day asked little Stella, a girl with curious eyes. "Because I wanted to work closer to home," Sarah answered, which was true, though not the whole truth. The move to the new apartment took place in mid-December. Amanda and Derek helped with the furniture and setup. Alex brought Aunt a houseplant as a gift, a small palm in a beautiful pot, so the home would feel alive right away, he explained, placing the plant on the windowsill. Sarah slept poorly the first night in the new apartment. Unfamiliar sounds, strange shadows from the streetlights, new smells, all reminded her that her previous life was in the past. But gradually, the new place began to feel like home. By New Year's, the apartment was fully arranged. New furniture, purchased partly with insurance money and partly on credit, created a cozy atmosphere. White curtains with a floral pattern hung in the kitchen, a gift from her mother. In the bedroom, a dresser displayed new family photos in beautiful frames. Life was returning to normal, but Sarah often thought about that fateful evening on the train. Who was the gypsy woman who had saved her life? Where did she get that gift of foresight? And most importantly, how could she find her to say thank you? Sarah returned to her normal life, but thoughts of that night didn't leave her in peace. Who was that mysterious woman with a child who had saved her? Why had she decided to warn a complete stranger? At first, Sarah tried to find the gypsy woman through social media, asking acquaintances who used the same train. But no one knew anything, as if the woman had vanished into thin air after that fateful evening. A month after moving, Sarah made a decision. On a Saturday, she went to Severnaya Station and sat on the same bench where she had waited for the train a month earlier. She brought a large bag of children's items, a baby snowsuit, diapers, jars of baby food, and toys. Maybe she'll show up here again? Sarah thought, looking around the platform. But an hour passed, and the familiar face did not appear. Then she approached the station attendant, an elderly man in a uniform jacket. "Excuse me, have you seen a gypsy woman with a baby here?" "About a month ago, she boarded a train. There are a lot of gypsies traveling through here," the attendant shrugged. "I don't recall any specific one like that." Sarah left the bag of items on the bench and went home. The following weekend, the same thing happened. She bought children's clothes, food, toys, and left them on the same bench at the station. "Sarah, are you planning to feed all the local homeless people your whole life?" Amanda asked, watching her sister prepare another charity package. "Not the homeless, but the woman who saved my life. Maybe she'll see it and understand it's from me. But you haven't seen her since. Maybe she wasn't even from around here. Maybe I will meet her." The main thing is to believe. Months passed, and Sarah continued her trips to the station. Gradually, it became a ritual for her, a way to express gratitude to fate for saving her life. The station attendants already knew her by sight and simply nodded when they saw her with another package. One day in April, as Sarah was leaving her usual gift on the bench, a young woman with a stroller approached her. "Excuse me, are you the one who always leaves things here?" she asked. "Yes, why?" Sarah replied cautiously. "I just wanted to say thank you. I sometimes come here with my child, and your gifts help a lot. My husband recently lost his job. We don't have enough money for baby supplies. Sarah looked at the thin young woman in a worn jacket, at her baby in the stroller, and realized that even if the gypsy woman never received her gifts, they were still reaching those in need. "Please take them, I'll keep bringing more," she said, adding, "Have you ever seen a gypsy woman with a child around here? Dark hair, bright skirt." "No, I haven't seen her." "Why do you ask?" "She saved my life. I want to thank her." The young woman shook her head. She had never seen anyone like that. A year had passed since the explosion. Sarah had fully settled into her new home, befriended her colleagues at the kindergarten, and established good relations with her neighbors. Life had become calm and measured. But every weekend, she still went to Severnaya Station. Now she no longer searched for the gypsy woman. She understood she would not appear, but she continued to leave her gift and silently thank the higher powers for her rescue. It had become her way of remembering that there is room for miracles in the world, that goodness exists in the most unexpected forms. "Mom, why does Aunt Sarah always go in that direction?" Alex asked Amanda one day. "She has a special place there. She prays and gives thanks," Amanda replied, and it was true. Sometimes Sarah wondered if that encounter had been real or a vision, but then she looked at her cozy apartment, her new job, and her sister's happy family nearby and understood. It didn't matter who that woman had been. What mattered was that, thanks to her, Sarah had been given a second chance at life. And each time she left another package on the station bench, she silently repeated, "Thank you, wherever you are. Goodness returns, even from strangers."